I was forced out of my family so they could devote everything to their golden child, then finally came, crawling back, when she ran the family business into the ground. By then, I was a self-made millionaire and no longer interested in saving them from their own choices. I was 13 when I realized my family had already decided who mattered. My name's Logan, 31 now. And if you'd asked me back then what kind of family I came from, I probably would have said normal. But looking back, the signs were always there. Subtle at first, like how my achievements were nice, while my younger sister Haley got full-on dinner celebrations for every minor trophy. Or how my parents always seemed a little too quick to drop everything for her dance recital, while I'd sit alone at my soccer games wondering if they got stuck in traffic again. They didn't. They just didn't come. Haley's 2 years younger than me. And to be fair, she was gifted. The kind of kid who sparkled on stage, who could walk into a room and draw every pair of eyes without trying. She had the charm, the grace, and the uncanny ability to cry on cue, which worked disturbingly well when she needed to get out of trouble or pin something on me. My parents, Lisa and Craig, were absolutely smitten with her. Not just in a proud parent kind of way, more like they saw her as some kind of golden investment. At first, I didn't mind. I wasn't the type to compete for attention. I liked tinkering with electronics, building stuff in the garage, learning how things worked. While Haley was perfecting pirouettes and getting standing ovations at the school play, I was wiring old computers back to life and making small cash fixing phones for neighbors. I was proud of my little projects, but my parents never really looked up from Haley long enough to notice. And when they did, it was usually to say something like, "That's nice, Logan, but don't spend too much time on that stuff. You don't want to burn out before you even get to college." College. That became the line in the sand. Haley was groomed for it. Elite summer camps, tutoring, college prep courses starting freshman year. Me, I was told to be realistic and consider trade school. Nothing wrong with trade school, of course. But it wasn't my dream. I wanted to study engineering, maybe even start a tech company someday. But whenever I mentioned it, I got the same response. A tight-lipped smile and a lecture about not everyone being cut out for big dreams. It stung, but I pushed through. I figured if I just proved myself, they'd come around. So I kept working, fixing things, learning to code, teaching myself software design from old manuals and YouTube videos. I built my first app at 16. It was clunky, ugly, and barely worked. But it was mine. I remember showing it to my parents expecting something. Interest, curiosity, maybe even pride. Instead, my mom glanced at her phone halfway through and said, "You know Haley's team might qualify for nationals this year. Isn't that exciting?" That was the first time I didn't answer, just nodded and left the room. The older we got, the worse it got. By the time Haley was applying to Ivy League schools with a team of private consultants and a vision board, my mom practically micromanaged. I was taking night classes at a community college and running a growing repair business from the basement. I was pulling in more money than I'd expected enough to buy my own beat-up car and start saving. But my parents still treated it like a hobby, like I was just spinning my wheels until I figured out something real to do. The moment that really hit me, though, was when Haley got into Columbia. Big moment, right? I congratulated her sincerely. I mean that. And the whole family threw this massive dinner party. Friends, extended relatives catered food, champagne for the adults. And somewhere between the speeches and the toasts, my dad stood up, clinked his glass, and said, "We always knew Haley would do something special. She's the kind of person who can lead a company someday, maybe even take over the family business." I froze. The family business. My dad owned a small but successful logistics company, something he built in his 20s. He used to tell me stories about working nights, hustling for contracts, sleeping in his truck. I always assumed he wanted to pass that on to me one day. We talked about it when I was younger. I thought I'd earn it. I looked at him that night, searching for some kind of signal that he hadn't just erased me from the future of our family. But he didn't even look in my direction, just raised his glass toward Haley, who was beaming like a Broadway star. I didn't say anything that night, didn't make a scene, but something inside me cracked. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet shift, like finally accepting a truth you've been trying not to see for years. They'd already decided. I was just the background noise to Haley's spotlight. Over the next couple of years, that truth kept unfolding. My parents funneled money into Haley's tuition, her off-campus apartment, even helped her launch a little fashion startup on the side. I asked for a small loan once to upgrade some servers for a client project, and they said they were tight on cash right now. I didn't ask again. I took on extra work instead, started skipping sleep, grinding harder. I got smarter about business-built relationships with developers, took online certifications in design and AI systems. Slowly, my side hustle evolved into something real. I still went to family dinners, still played the role, but I stopped expecting anything from them. They didn't notice the change, not really. As long as I smiled, said, "Congrats, Haley, on cue," and kept my mouth shut. I stayed invisible. But then came the pivot, the twist that set everything else in motion. 3 years ago, my dad called a family meeting. I remember it clearly because it was the first time in forever that he said he wanted to talk to me about the business. My heart actually leapt a little. I thought maybe he saw me finally, but no. He said he was retiring early and wanted to transition the company into a new era. That's how he phrased it. Said he'd been thinking hard about who should take over. And after careful consideration, he decided it was time to bring Haley in as CEO. She'd been learning leadership at school, understood branding, and had natural charisma, things he claimed were more important now than logistics or operations. I asked calmly, what would happen to the management team, to the systems, to the staff who'd been with the company for decades? He said, they'll adapt, it's time for fresh blood. And me, I asked. He smiled like he pitied me. Logan, you're doing well in your own way. But this just isn't your lane. That line, it stuck with me like a splinter under my skin. Haley took over, and predictably, everything started falling apart. At first, it was slow. A few clients lost. Some staff left. She brought in her college friends to modernize operations, fired old hands who'd built the company from the ground up, rebranded with a shiny new logo and a bizarre mission statement that sounded like it was generated by an AI trying to be quirky. The numbers started dropping. Vendors got frustrated, but my parents, they kept defending her. She's finding her footing, they said. She just needs time. I stayed quiet, focused on my own projects. My business had evolved into a full-fledged tech consultancy by then, with 5 employees and clients across 3 countries. But I didn't brag, didn't gloat. Still, I watched. I watched as Haley ran the company into the ground, as my parents doubled down on their faith in her, even when the cracks were clearly showing. And then a few months ago, I got a call from my mom. She sounded tired, shaky. "Logan," she said, "we need to talk. It is about the business." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the charts on my second monitor. One of my newest contracts had just cleared for 7 figures, but I didn't mention that. "Okay," I said. "What's going on?" There was a pause, a long one. "It's bad. Haley made some mistakes, big ones. The company's in trouble. We're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. We were wondering if you could come by and maybe take a look." That was the moment everything started to shift. I said nothing at first, just let the silence stretch, because part of me wanted to help. Despite everything, they were still my family. But another part, an older, sharper part, remembered all the times they chose her. All the times I was told to stay in my lane. All the dinners I spent smiling while they toasted her success like I didn't exist. And now, they were calling me begging. That's when I realized they hadn't just underestimated me. They'd forgotten I existed. And now they were remembering at the worst possible time. But the thing is, I wasn't the same Logan they pushed aside, and I had no intention of saving them quietly. I didn't go over to their house right away, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I needed to feel that they needed me. After years of being the afterthought, the shadow and Haley spotlight, it felt strange having them reach out first. My mom sent a follow-up text the next day. "Logan, I know you're busy, but this is serious. Dad is worried. We could really use your insight." I almost laughed at that insight, as if I hadn't been quietly building my own empire while they poured every resource into my sister's vanity projects. Still, I agreed to come by later that week. I didn't wear a suit, just jeans and a hoodie. I wanted to remind them that I was still me. The version they decided didn't look like success. My mom opened the door looking 5 years older than I remembered. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in days. "Logan," she said, pulling me into a hug, "it's really bad." The living room looked the same, but the energy was off. My dad was sitting stiff on the couch, staring at a folder like it was full of death certificates. And Haley, she wasn't even there. Apparently, she was meeting with a branding coach that afternoon, which according to my mom was crucial. "She's still trying to be optimistic," my mom explained, wringing her hands. "But we've lost 3 major clients in the last 2 months. Payroll bounced last week. And well, the bank froze our credit line. I kept my face neutral. Inside, I felt a mix of things, pity, vindication, even a sliver of guilt. But mostly I felt detached, like I was watching a documentary about people I used to know. They laid it all out for me. Haley had taken over 2 years ago. At first, she was full of energy and grand ideas rebranding the company, switching to trendy new logistics software that no one in the warehouse could understand. She fired the operations manager, someone who'd been with my dad since year one because he wasn't vibing with the new culture. She'd hired her college roommate to handle vendor contracts, which ended in a legal mess. And she was bleeding money on useless influencers to elevate the company's image. I flipped through the reports. Read, and you let this happen? I asked flatly, looking between them. My dad didn't meet my eyes. We thought she just needed more time. She's under a lot of pressure. You know how hard it is for women in business. That nearly made me choke. I've worked with brilliant women, driven, competent, creative powerhouses. Haley didn't lack opportunity. She lacked accountability. They asked if I could look into the back-end systems, maybe recommend someone to help, but I could tell what they were really asking. They just didn't want to say the words yet. Not out loud. After 2 hours, I told them I'd think about it, that I'd need access to some files and admin dashboards if they wanted a real assessment. They agreed instantly. My dad even muttered something like, "We should have brought you in earlier." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. When I finally saw Haley the next week, she barely acknowledged me. "Oh, hey, Logan," she said, flipping her sunglasses onto her head. "You're here to do it stuff, right?" I looked at her, waiting. She smirked. "Don't worry, I won't get in your way. I know it's more your speed, more my speed." She still saw me as the nerd in the garage fiddling with wires while she conquered the world. But the world she built was burning, and she hadn't even noticed the smoke. Over the next few weeks, I dug in, and what I found was worse than I expected. Haley had misclassified employees as contractors, leading to a mountain of back taxes. She defaulted on multiple service contracts. There was a $60,000 marketing campaign that led to zero ROI because the influencer she'd hired turned out to be shadow banned for scamming followers. The CRM was a mess. Orders were falling through the cracks, and somehow she was still drawing a 6-figure salary and expensing luxury handbags as client gifts. I put together a 20-page report. I outlined immediate threats, midterm recovery options, and long-term strategic pivots. I color-coded everything. My team. Yes, I had a team helped mock up automation tools that could streamline their process and cut costs by 40% within 3 months. I sent it to my dad and said we should meet in person. When I showed up that Saturday, Haley was there. "I read your little report," she said, before I even sat down. "Cute, very spreadsheet." "Why?" My mom flinched. "Haley, please." "No, I mean it," she continued, arms folded. "It's all so logical, so binary. But business isn't just numbers, Logan. It's about vision and relationships and storytelling." "Haley," I said calmly, "your storytelling lost the company $300,000 last quarter." She rolled her eyes. "You're just bitter. You always have been. This isn't about saving the company. It's about you trying to prove something." I looked at my dad, at my mom, waiting for them to intervene. They didn't. So I stood up. "You're right," I said. "This isn't about proving anything because I already did. I built something on my own. I don't need your validation." I turned to my parents. "But if you want this company to survive, she can't be in charge. Not even on paper. I'll help, but only if I have full control. Operational, financial, legal." Haley gasped like I'd slapped her. "You're not serious. You want them to just hand it over to you." "No, I said I want them to save it. You ran it into the ground. I'm offering to fix it for a moment." No one said anything. Then my mom stood. "Maybe we should talk about this calmly." "No," I said, "it's not a discussion. It's a decision." My dad looked torn. His pride in Haley was written all over his face. But so was the exhaustion, the fear. And then Haley said the thing that finally snapped the last thread of goodwill I had left. "If you do this," she said, pointing at me like a child, "I'll tell everyone you sabotaged me, that you planted bad data. I'll go online, Logan. I have followers. You don't get to erase me just because you're jealous." The room went dead silent, and my mom actually looked scared. That's when I realized they knew maybe not everything, but they knew she was unstable. knew she was careless, and they let her do it anyway because they were too scared of breaking her perfect golden girl image, even as the house crumbled. "I'm done," I said quietly. "If you want my help, I want it in writing. Full authority. I'll have my lawyer send over a draft. You've got 48 hours." Haley laughed, but there was no real sound in it, just air and desperation. "You think you're better than me?" she whispered. "No," I said, walking toward the door. "I know I am." And then just before I stepped out, my mom called after me. "Logan, please don't walk away from us." I paused, but I didn't turn around because after everything, they still hadn't said what needed to be said. And until they did, I wasn't coming back. I didn't cry when I left that house. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or call my best friend or drown myself in whiskey like some dramatic movie character. No, I drove home in silence, windows down, letting the cool wind numb my face. When I got back to my apartment, a minimalist space with more servers than furniture, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. It was a weird feeling. Not quite anger, not quite sadness, just empty. I guess I'd always held on to this tiny hope that maybe one day things would balance out, that my parents would see me, not just glance at me, not just remember to send a birthday text, but really see me as someone capable, as someone worthy. But what Haley said that day, and how quickly they let her say it, stripped that illusion clean off. They weren't going to choose me. They never had. And it was time I stopped waiting around like some backup quarterback hoping to get called off the bench. For the first week after that blowout, I didn't do much. My team at the consultancy picked up the slack. I had automated a good chunk of the admin side, and our client base was stable. We were okay. I was okay, but inside, I felt like I'd been cracked open. Not destroyed, but definitely peeled back to something raw, exposed. On day 8, I pulled out an old composition notebook from high school. The cover was frayed, corners bent. Inside were sketches, my original ideas for an app I'd once dreamed of building. It was dumb, maybe just a tool to help small businesses track their inventory across different platforms. Back then, I didn't have the skill to make it real. Now I did. That was the moment something clicked. If I was going to rise, it had to be on my terms. No more waiting for their approval. No more trying to prove anything to people who only knew how to look past me. I stayed up that night until 4 a.m. mapping out version 2.0. No distractions, no second ging, just pure focused work. It felt good, familiar, like coming home to a version of myself I hadn't visited in years. That same week, I met with a mentor, someone I'd known through a tech incubator years ago. Her name was Camille Google, now investing in underrepresented founders. I told her I wanted to pivot, build something scalable, not just fix broken systems for other people, but create my own. She listened, asked questions, took notes, and then she said something that stuck with me. They underestimated you. That's their loss. But don't make it yours too. So I got to work again. My consultancy team thought I was nuts at first. Shifting our focus meant we'd lose some steady revenue, but I had enough saved to keep us afloat for 6 months, maybe more. And I'd rather gamble on myself than keep cleaning up other people's messes forever. We started small, just me, an engineer named Eli, and a UX designer named Marcy. We met every day in my apartment. No white bars, no ping pong tables, just laptops, coffee, and furious brainstorming. The product was simple in theory, an intuitive AI-powered logistics platform for small to mid-sized businesses. One that could learn patterns, suggest solutions, and cut overhead costs in half without needing a dedicated IT team. I called it Glassline because it was built to make the invisible visible. Every shipment, every delay, every dollar, and something about that name felt personal. The first version launched in 6 months. It wasn't perfect, but it was clean, fast, and best of all, it worked. We got beta users through LinkedIn connections, and word of mouth spread fast. By the end of year 1, we had over 300 businesses using it. I didn't take a paycheck the entire time. I lived modestly. No vacations, no shopping sprees, no flashy car. Just me, building something real while everyone else still thought I was just some basement tech guy who didn't understand the bigger picture. Occasionally, I get updates through the grapevine. My parents never reached out directly, but I still had cousins who talked. They said the family company was hemorrhaging clients. Haley had apparently doubled down on some influencer campaign that backfired, and she'd started blaming toxic negativity from old staff for the drop in revenue. Classic Haley. I didn't engage, didn't comment, just listened, nodded, and went back to my work. But then something interesting happened. 16 months after our launch, Glassline was featured in a mid-tier business magazine as one of 10 startups reshaping logistics. A few weeks after that, we got our first acquisition offer from a competitor I'd admired for years. I turned it down, not because I didn't want the money, but because it wasn't time yet. I wasn't building this just to cash out. I wanted it to grow to last, to be the thing people remembered me for. Not the kid fixing phones in the garage, not the guy who got passed over for a failing CEO, but Logan Shaw, founder of Glassline. A month later, I got a text from my mom. "Logan, can we please talk?" I stared at it for a long time. The next morning, I got a call from my dad. I didn't pick up, but then something shifted. I got an email official this time sent from the family company's domain. It was a formal request to consult on a last-ditch restructuring plan. They were finally using the word I'd waited years to hear help. Not because they wanted to be kind, not because they saw me, but because they were drowning. The business was on the brink of collapse. Vendors were walking. A lawsuit had been filed by a former warehouse manager who claimed wrongful termination. Haley had apparently left town for a spiritual retreat and wasn't answering emails. And their accountant, who I vaguely remembered as a guy named Dennis, who smelled like cough drops, had resigned mid-quarter and left no notes. They didn't just want me to help, they wanted me to save them. And for a brief moment, I almost said yes. Not because they deserved it, but because the company did. There were still employees there, people I remembered from holidays and company picnics, people who had once handed me snacks and patted my head and said, "You're going to be just like your dad someday." But then I read the last line of the email. "We hope you'll consider this. Haley did her best. Please understand, this wasn't her fault. That was the nail in the coffin. Even now they couldn't admit the truth, couldn't call it what it was." So I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Camille and asked her to set up a meeting with our legal counsel. If they were serious about a handover, it wasn't going to be a casual favor. I was done doing things out of guilt or hope. I had built something they never believed I could. And now that it was standing taller than the empire they gave away to Haley, now they wanted back in. But I was no longer the kid waiting in the wings. I was the one holding the curtain open. And they were about to find out just how much that stage had changed. It was strange how calm I felt drafting the email. No bitterness, no adrenaline rush, just quiet clarity. Camille sat across from me in the co-working space we'd upgraded to after closing our first big round of funding. The room was bright modern, full of glass walls and warm lighting, the kind of space I used to dream about when I was coding from a rickety desk in my bedroom with takeout boxes stacked beside me. Now it was real. Mine. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I told her as I hit send. "I know," she said, "but you're also not doing it out of guilt, and that's important." She was right. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to my family. I was responding to reality with precision, with leverage, with power. The letter I sent wasn't aggressive. It was professional. I addressed it to both my parents, outlining the potential acquisition of their company by Glassline Technologies Incorporated. It wasn't a consultation offer. It wasn't a proposal for shared leadership. It was a buyout offer with terms attached. Complete operational control. Full ownership transfer within 30 days. All decision-making authority shifted to me and my executive board. Haley removed from any leadership or shareholder role permanently. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting the business from further damage and protecting my own name from being associated with their mess unless I had full control. I sent it, closed my laptop, and didn't think about it again for the rest of the day. I had other meetings, other projects. Glassline was in talks with a major shipping chain that wanted to pilot our tracking software across their regional centers. I couldn't afford to get emotionally tangled again. But later that night, the response came. Not from my mom, not from my dad, from Haley. The subject line, "This is war." The email itself, a rant paragraphs of blame, denial, twisted logic. She accused me of manipulating our parents, of preying on a vulnerable moment. Said I was trying to erase her legacy and steal something that was never mine to begin with. My favorite line, though, "You were never meant to lead Logan. You just waited in the shadows long enough for something to fall into your lap." I stared at that line for a long time because for a moment I believed it. Not because it was true, but because it had been fed to me for so long. The same script over and over again. "You're not a leader. You're not special. You're not Haley." But then I remembered the nights I stayed up coding while Haley partied. The years I spent building something real while she crafted Instagram captions for fake brands. I remembered every invoice I'd chased, every bug I'd fixed, every investor who told me no until they finally said yes. Nothing fell into my lap. I built this brick by brick so I didn't reply to her email. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked him to file it away under hostile communications. If she wanted war, I'd meet her with silence and strategy. The next few days were a blur of planning. My legal team got to work drafting a formal letter of intent. Camille and I met with our CFO and finance advisors to determine the ceiling for a strategic buyout. I didn't want the company because I miss my family. I wanted it because it had value if salvaged properly. The logistics infrastructure was still solid. The branding was a mess. The client relationships burned, but the bones of the business were there. It could be rebuilt with the right leadership. I started reaching out to old staff members quietly, the ones Haley had let go when they didn't align with her aesthetic. They were wary at first, hesitant to talk, but once I explained what I was doing, the responses changed. One by one, they offered to come back with conditions, sure, but the trust was there. They remembered me not as the kid who used to hang around the office on half days, but as the guy who never talked down to them, who asked questions, who actually cared about how things worked. I also tapped my CTO, Eli, to review the failing back-end systems at the family company. He hacked together a demo that showed exactly how our glass-lined platform could replace the outdated infrastructure and save hundreds of thousands within a year. It wasn't just about taking over, it was about evolution. Meanwhile, Camille pulled strings with a few silent investors who were interested in expanding our reach. They didn't care about the family drama. They cared about ROI. And if I could secure the acquisition, it would open doors into a different market segment entirely. Things were falling into place. But then came the curveball. My parents requested a meeting, not over email, not through lawyers. In person at the office, not their crumbling one mind. At first, I hesitated. Every instinct told me it was a trap, some emotional appeal, some guilt trip designed to make me flinch. But Camille convinced me to take it. You don't have to agree to anything, she said, but power isn't just about winning, it's about showing up on your terms. So I said yes. They arrived late. My mom looked tired more than before. Her blouse was wrinkled and there was a visible stain on her sleeve. My dad looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like the years had finally caught up with him. They sat across from me in the glass conference room, sunlight casting clean lines across the table. You've come a long way, my dad said, eyes scanning the space. I have, I said simply. Why are we here? My mom spoke first. We read the offer and we're not ready to sign over everything. I waited, said nothing. But she continued. We're willing to give you partial control, a transition period, 6 months of shared leadership. We think that's fair. I nodded slowly, then stood up. Meeting's over. What? My dad said, startled. You don't have 6 months, I said. You barely have 6 weeks. Your accounts are redlined. Your staff is leaving. Haley's one influencer away from dragging your brand through another PR disaster. And you think this is leverage? My mom's voice cracked. Logan, please. It's still our company. No, I said it was. Now it's a sinking ship and I'm offering you a lifeboat. If you don't want it, that's fine, but don't pretend you're still at the helm. Silence stretched. And then my dad whispered something I wasn't expecting. She said she'd sue us. I blinked. What Haley, he said, not meeting my eyes. She said if we signed the company over to you, she'd sue for emotional damages. Claim we cut her out unfairly, that we destroyed her future. I laughed. Actually, laughed. That's rich, I muttered. She destroyed herself. I just offered to clean up. They didn't respond. I softened slightly. I'm not here to hurt her, I said. I'm here to save what's left. But I won't do it half blind. I won't do it with one hand tied behind my back. They looked at each other. My mom wiped her eyes. Then my dad said quietly, We'll talk to the lawyers. That night, I stayed up late in the office. I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. There was too much still at stake. But something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just fighting for a seat at the table. I was building the damn table, choosing who sat at it, what the menu was, what the rules were. I had the leverage now, and I was going to use it not to destroy, but to rebuild in my image. My parents signed the papers exactly 12 days after that meeting. It happened on a Wednesday morning in a lawyer's office overlooking the city skyline. The conference room was quiet except for the shuffling of papers and the occasional click of a pen. My mom didn't look at me. My dad's hand trembled slightly when he signed the last page. Haley wasn't there. She'd refused to attend, sending a furious email the night before that ended with, "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." But I didn't regret anything. The moment the deal was done, Glassline Technologies officially acquired the family business, renamed it, restructured it, and began the full-scale transformation. We called it Shawlink. Not for ego, for clarity. The old company was tainted, bloated, broken. Shawlink was clean, precise, scalable, and for the first time in its 37-year existence, it was mine. The first thing I did was walk through the old building. It was eerie. Dusty corners, empty desks, broken vending machines. Half the warehouse lights didn't even turn on. My dad had once told me this company was his proudest achievement. But under Haley's leadership, it had become a husk. So we gutted it. Not completely, just enough to breathe life back in. We brought in my team from Glassline. They updated the logistics systems, automated half the manual processes, and implemented real-time shipment tracking with predictive delays. It took weeks of working late, weekends included, but the energy was electric. Everyone could feel it. Something big was happening. I personally rehired 5 people Haley had fired. The operations manager, Tim, nearly cried when I walked into the diner he worked at and asked if he wanted to come back. He didn't even ask about salary, just shook my hand and said, "I've been waiting for this day for years." The staff meetings felt different now. No more jargon, no more buzzword-heavy slideshows. We talked numbers, results, strategy, and people listened. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. And then came the real moment of payoff. 3 months after the acquisition, we landed a contract with a nationwide medical supplier. They needed efficient, discrete distribution across 12 states with zero tolerance for delays. The old company would have buckled under the weight of that request. Shawink executed flawlessly, and just like that, revenue doubled. Meanwhile, Haley imploded. After the sale, she tried to rally support online, made a long, overly filtered video titled "The Truth About My Brother's Takeover," and painted herself as the visionary who had been cut down by corporate greed and patriarchal control. Her followers, mostly lifestyle fans and wannabe entrepreneurs, sympathized for about a week. Then screenshots surfaced: emails, invoices, internal memos, leaks from staff who'd had enough. Turns out trying to be a CEO while running a fashion blog doesn't sit well with actual business people. By the end of the month, her credibility was shredded. She lost sponsorships. Her branding coach dropped her. Even her favorite wellness retreat in Sedona canceled her speaking engagement. She sent me one final message: "Congratulations. Hope it was worth destroying your sister's career for a stupid warehouse." I didn't reply because it wasn't about her career. It was about everyone else she'd stepped on trying to build it. My parents stayed quiet after the sale. For the most part, I heard from mutuals that my mom was embarrassed to go to her book club, that my dad stopped talking about the business at all. They hadn't just lost the company, they'd lost the illusion. For years, they thought they were shaping a dynasty through Haley, but they were just propping up a house of cards. 6 months after the acquisition, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was low, worn down. "Logan, I just wanted to say I saw the article in Forbes. You're doing something incredible. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner. That should have hit me hard. It didn't, because by then I didn't need it. I'd already won. Not just the company, not just the success. I won back myself. The version of me I used to bury for their comfort. The kid who fixed old phones and drew app sketches and composition notebooks. The teenager who swallowed his pride every time they said, "Be realistic." The man they tried to pretend was just doing okay in his own little way. He wasn't little anymore. He was the reason hundreds of people had jobs, families had income, and vendors were getting paid on time, and they knew it now. Everyone did. We held a relaunch event at the new headquarters, a modern facility on the outskirts of the city. It was sleek, energy efficient, and equipped with tech that made our old warehouse look prehistoric. Clients flew in from all over the country. We unveiled our new partnerships, presented future expansion plans, and celebrated the next chapter of Shawink. I stood on the main stage at the end of the night. No script, no slides, just a microphone and a packed room. "I want to thank everyone who believed in the work before the world did," I said. "To the ones who stayed loyal, who got back up after every setback, who made something out of nothing, we did this together." The applause was thunderous. I stepped off stage and walked out into the cool evening air. There were stars overhead, quiet, clear. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anything, No bitterness, no need for revenge, just peace. And that, I think, was the real win. Because in the end, they didn't just underestimate me, they handed me the keys to prove them wrong. And I did it silently, relentlessly, without permission but on my terms. And that was the last time anyone ever called me the shadow.